reckon I'm going to get started. So welcome again, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Dealing with Public Speaking Anxiety. As I say, such a common issue for so many people. So what we are going to learn tonight, now, I'm having the same problem as I had last time, which is that my slides have decided not to advance. So I might have to just go out of it for 1 second. And then share it again. And there's a delay on Google Hangouts, so you might find that, there we go, you might find that you're still sitting there going, well, the slide hasn't moved, but in a moment it will move. There's about a 40-second to 1 minute delay, so that can kick in. So my goals for you on this webinar are that you will learn some techniques to deal with public speaking anxiety, things that you can put into practice immediately that will really make a difference to how you feel. And you may have heard some of these techniques before, but I would ask you to keep a very open mind and not just say, I know that, because saying, oh, yes, I know that, I've heard it before, is not necessarily helpful to looking towards trying something. Even if you have heard it before, give it a go, and that openness can really make a difference. So the learning to deal with the level of anxiety or fear that you may have, and which will then get you towards sustainable speaking success over time. So that's what I'm after for you. So what's coming up? Basically, you're going to get a physical technique, which is going to help you before you present. And you will also learn some ways to take control back when you are already anxious. Things that you can do in the run-up and also while you're actually presenting to make yourself feel better about your speaking, and also to help your audience perceive you as being less anxious and more confident. And then the third thing that we're going to look at is a key component that you need to understand, that we all need to understand, about fear and how fear works, how it perpetuates, and how you can help to alleviate that fear. So first of all, let's look at your personal why. Why is it so important for you at this point? Presumably you've bothered to sign up and register and turn up for this webinar, which is pretty amazing. So why is it important to you at this point? Is it something that you've struggled with for a long time? Can be for many of my clients. So if we look at the goals at the top of this slide, often the goals, people say to me, I just want to be free of the stress. I want to feel as though when I know I have to give a presentation, I'm not panicking and having sleepless nights and freaking out for weeks, sometimes for months. If I have clients who have to give, say, a keynote presentation at a national conference, or even they have to go internationally, that can be such a drain on their energy and their sleep patterns and really get in the way. So people will often say, I just want to be liberated from how I feel now. It just feels horrible. Some people are more away from people, so they focus on getting away from the pain and the fear. Some people want to move towards confidence and being more confident, more engaging in front of a group. And of course, at the top here, I've also written on the right self-worth, because it really can tie into how we see ourselves and our own self-image, our self-belief. And when you improve your public speaking skills, you actually starts to spiral, and you feel more belief frequently in other areas of your life, and you build your confidence that way, because public speaking is one of the greatest personal development tools that I believe we can possibly have. It's a difficult activity. Speaking in public is hard, and it really does challenge people. And their actual perception is nowadays, in terms of the research, is that we're actually wired this way, that when we are separated from our group or our tribe and we're on our own and we have no defense, because the lectern is not really enough to defend yourself, is it, if the crowd decides to come at you. So you're on your own in a clearing and you have the audience looking at you, your tribe looking at you, that it means that you're in danger and you're going to potentially be abandoned, killed, left behind. That basically it's a survival threat, because when we did survive by being part of a tribe, the best way to do that was to get on with your tribe. And if you were ostracized, you were in deep trouble. So the research is now telling us that we believe that that's within our system, and that we're always going to have a level of activation when we are in front of a group. So people who say to me, oh, but I want to be relaxed in front of a group, I say to them, look, it is a possible goal, and it depends on your reference point, how you define relaxation. But when you're in front of an audience, are you going to feel as relaxed as you would be when you're sitting on the couch at home watching TV or watching a movie or a DVD or whatever? No, you're not, because you actually want that level of activation in your system, and you will have it there when you have an audience looking at you. That is totally normal. So one of the things that can really help you is to know that you may not entirely remove the fear. A level of activation, as I say, is normal. It is how we're wired, and it may never completely disappear. But the goal is to make it workable, and not only workable, but actually helpful. Because if you can learn techniques and tools to deal with the public speaking anxiety and to feel as though you have more control, and that's something I'm going to come to in a moment, is working with taking control back so that you don't feel helpless or that incredible loss of control. If you have that, then you will be absolutely fine, and you will be able to say, look, yes, I'm nervous, but it's part of the deal, and it doesn't overwhelm me, and I can actually function, and not only function, but function well, and function with a level of alertness that some degree of nervousness will give you. And people who say that they're not nervous about public speaking, potentially they either are not telling the truth for whatever reason, or they've actually just redefined it in their own mind. They've reframed how they see public speaking anxiety, and they might see it as a level of alertness or interest or activation that actually gets them moving. Coming back to the slide, your own personal why, the fears that we have is a lack of control, as I've just mentioned, the feeling that we have helplessness and we can't deal with what's happening to us. There's also a fear of judgment and humiliation, and we all feel that unless we are narcissistic personalities and we really don't care. Like, I have met a couple of people in my life who seriously do not care what other people think of them. That is relatively rare, I have to say. As I say, I've only really met a couple. And one of those people was a very unusual man from the US, really, really unusual in how he saw life. Very fascinating, but he didn't care at all what people thought of him. That is unusual. We do care normally, and we look for audience approval. We don't want to be judged. We don't want to be humiliated. And fundamentally, I often say to clients and in groups that really it's like we're still small children inside, and the small child within us is still looking for security and approval and to be liked. And public speaking can be a difficult forum for that, because it forces us to stand up and face an audience and an audience judgment. And we do judge as audience members. We know that, because when you go to a presentation, you also judge the speaker. Hopefully you judge them kindly and you want them to do well, but you still judge them. And for some people, the why, wanting to be free of this anxiety, is simply because they suffer from an overwhelming discomfort or level of distress. And again, that is very common. I see that a lot. I've had clients cry frequently in their first session at the beginning, particularly at the beginning of the first session, where it can just be overwhelming for them. But I also have to say that these clients have been able to move on and deal with that anxiety. So there are ways around it. And the workplace business why, that may be more important for you than the personal why. It often is, because it forces you to say, I have to do something about this. And your goals in the workplace may well be influence. You want to be heard. You want to be acknowledged. You might want a promotion, which ties into the greater income, which can also come with being a better public speaker. And you want more impact. So the 3 I's, I call them: influence, income, and impact. And they can all play a big factor in wanting to improve your skills. And the fears, the same things. The only one that I've added is the imposter syndrome, because this is a really common syndrome. They've called it a syndrome. Psychologists now talk about it, and they believe that it affects up to 70 to 80% of the adult workforce at any given time in their working life. That at some point you are going to turn up to a new job or a presentation you have to give, and you are going to say, these people are going to find me out. They're going to know that I don't know what I'm talking about. That's a horrible feeling, and it's really common. So again, it's normalizing that and knowing that we, at some point, we all feel that. So yeah, that's just, again, part of the deal, and there are things that we can do about it. Okay, so how does your own fear show up? Physical symptoms, very, very common. You might suffer from shaky voice, shaky hands. You might flush or blush. Your heart might pound. That's a big one for me. My heart pounds. And that's just adrenaline. When it kicks in, when you perceive that you're under danger, you're under threat, we actually kick into fight-flight syndrome. And this fight-flight tells us that we want to run away or we want to fight. And of course, when we're in a boardroom situation or a meeting, whatever it is, of course, we can't do either of those things. So we get stuck and we freeze. And the adrenaline banks up in our system and we shake. And that's all it is. All these symptoms, the shaking, the flushing, it's a way of our body saying we perceive that we're under threat and we want to do something about it, but we are stuck. So one of the things that I always recommend that people do, and I'm going into a solution for you now, is that you actually exercise before you present, if possible, whether that means you go for a walk around the block or a run, depending on how active you are, if you can. If you can't, if you don't have time, see if you can go into the toilet and actually, do star jumps. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I have done it. I have had clients do it. It makes a big difference. Karate chop the air, whatever it is to get your body moving, because what we do when we're afraid is we freeze and we hold on. We try to control in the wrong ways and we hold on to what we're feeling in our system. And what we actually need to do is let it move through our system. And I will come back to this. And your own fear may also show up with the need for acceptance that I've just talked about, and maintaining status and your mask. We all have a social mask that we put on when we go to work or when we go into some sort of social situation. And we want that mask, that basically our ego, to be maintained. We don't want cracks to show in the mask. And public speaking is very threatening to that, because we can be seen and we are vulnerable in that position, and that puts us in danger again of that mask cracking. So we don't want that to happen. So what would you love to happen instead? What would be your ideal scenario from public speaking? It might be confidence, and feel free to write this in the chat box if you'd like to. So what would you love to have happen instead? For a lot of my clients, they say that they want to actually enjoy their speaking, and that's a real factor for them, and they don't think it can ever happen, but that's what they would love to happen. Clients just want to be more engaging. They want to be more confident. They just want to make it less of a nightmare as well. That's a common one. I just want to stop dreading this. So that's a real factor as well. All right, so 3 big struggles. Time, people say, I don't have time to do this. Energy, that people don't have the energy. They say, look, I'm so busy. My life is overwhelming and I can't possibly do some work on this. Let me say to you, you can make small shifts and make a really big difference to your public speaking skills. You do not have to spend hours and hours. And in fact, some of the things that you can learn how to do and some of the things that I can teach you are things that you can put into practice that take a few minutes a day, and they will make a big difference to you. And of course, the third one is the mental perspective. Here's this worried, poor little dog, pug dog, looking so worried. And that's a major factor for so many people. It's too late for me, it won't work. I just can't face it. I promise you, I'm going to give you a solution today on how to make that work for you, how to face it. There are ways of doing this. Okay, so very, very quickly, my story is that I was an extremely stressed out musician. I was a classical pianist. That's my training. I went to music college, which is an absolutely cutthroat, terrifying place to be, where you're really only as good as your last performance, and you're heavily judged and criticized. And it was very stressful, but I coped. And then I became ill and I didn't leave the house, and I'd basically lost my nerve. I didn't leave the house for 3 months, went back into trying to perform, and I couldn't perform. I had lost my nerve. And I found that my way back was through learning how to speak in public. I was a terrible speaker as well. I gulped mid-sentence, pretty much every sentence, and you cannot hide your nerves if you gulp. There's something called the illusion of transparency, which works brilliantly for people. If you shake a little bit, or your heart is pounding and you think everyone can see it, or you flush, basically, I always say to my clients, look, what you think, what you're feeling is 10 times magnified what people can actually see. So we have what in psychology is termed an illusion of transparency. And that means that we think that everyone can see exactly how we're feeling. And often clients will say to me, if I video them, oh my goodness, I look better than I thought. I look a lot better than I thought. People can't tell. Yes, they may be able to tell if your voice shakes and it's really obvious, but frequently it's not nearly as obvious to the audience as it is to you. Having said that, if you have a gulping mid-sentence problem, as I did, then everybody does know, because you can't hide that. It's that one is really obvious. And I couldn't look people in the eye. I had major challenges. So I went and learned how to speak in public, ended up loving it, and now this is what I've moved into as my career. And it's something that I'm completely passionate about, and my life's work is to help people who are afraid of speaking. And in terms of this, why listen to me? I've hundreds of clients, testimonials from many people. If you're interested, you can go to my website and have a look at what people have said. I also have a LinkedIn profile where people have recommended. But this is not about me. This is the only reason I talk about this, is to say that what I teach people, it really works. It can work. It has worked for clients, and it can work for you. And nobody is a hopeless case. There is always something that you can do that will shift you and will make a difference. Does it take some practice and work? Absolutely it does. And it's different for everybody. But as I've said, you can actually make quite big shifts by not doing very much at all, just a different perspective or a few minutes a day, and you can start to really shift. So just to let you know that at the end of this webinar, and then we're going to go into the material in 10 seconds. At the end of this webinar, you're going to be offered my 3-session webinar coaching course, and there's a bonus as well, which you'll learn about if you stay till the end. And I will be emailing you a link which you can click on if you are interested in signing up for the course. And having said that, today's webinar will also give you practical tools. Hopefully you've learned something already if you've been on the webinar for the last 15 minutes or so, but tools that you can learn to implement straight away. So let's get into the very first one. First one is a proven way to reduce fear and also to create presence before you start to speak. And that is to make sure that you breathe. And I have had clients say to me, oh, no, I've tried this and it doesn't work. I promise you it does work. I used to think breathing didn't work, but I wasn't doing it correctly. I thought partly that it was deep breathing, and this is something that people often get wrong. If you deep breathe and you take really big breaths, you will probably hyperventilate and need to breathe into a paper bag after a couple of minutes or so, because it actually is the wrong balance of oxygen in your system if you do that. We're not after deep breathing. What we're after is abdomen breathing, low down breathing. And there's a reason for this. Let me show you. If we go into an abdomen breath, so you're breathing down into your belly, your abdomen, rather than the shallow upper chest breathing that we all do when we're stressed out. When you breathe low down, it actually sends the signal to your nervous system that you're safe and that you're actually not stressed and that you're okay. You can deal with whatever's happening. Because it is actually impossible to be breathing calmly and slowly and be stressed out at the same time. Those two things cannot coexist. So if you can breathe, and it takes basically 5 or 6 breaths, so about 30 seconds, Your aim is to breathe low down into your abdomen. Let me show you where to breathe from. You need to imagine that you have a belt of nostrils. Not a very attractive image, and I do like blue slides if possible, but I couldn't find a blue pig, so we have this pig. But it's a reminder for you. Hopefully, perhaps the image will remind you that you want to think that you have a belt of nostrils. So you breathe down, you imagine that the belt, and one reason I talk about a belt is because the belt goes all the way around you. And we also want to breathe into our back, because often we just see ourselves as breathing into the front half of our body, but in fact you want your rib cage to lift outwards and upwards when you breathe in, and you want to fill up. So as you breathe in, you actually want your stomach to go out, not in. Some people get this confused, but when you breathe in, you want your stomach to go out because you're filling up with air. And as you fill up, it's like a vase. You're filling a vase with water, but you're actually filling your lungs with air, and your lungs expand. And as I say, you take 20 to 30 seconds, 5 or 6 breaths, that's all you need. And you don't fight your breathing. If you're struggling and you're breathing fast, you don't fight it, you just focus on the breath, and you see if you can bring that breath to slow down a little bit and go low down, and it will tell your system that you're safe. So let me go back to the previous slide. This also helps you to think more clearly, because when we don't breathe properly, low down, when I say properly, I mean low down. When we don't breathe properly, we can lose up to 50% of the oxygen getting to our brain. That's 50%. That's a huge amount. And people who say to me that they suffer from brain freeze and mind blanks when they present, it is normally, I always ask them, have you thought about your breathing? And they say, no, never thought about it. And I go, okay, I think that's probably what's happening. Adrenaline kicks in. As you know, adrenaline kicks in, you shake, whatever it is, your heart rate goes up, and you stop breathing low down. You shallow breathe. And this means that you cannot think clearly. It's really important to breathe calmly as you're waiting to present. So if you're sitting in your cubicle at work and you're waiting for a conference call and you're nervous, focus on your breath. If you're waiting to be introduced at a conference, focus on your breath. There are other things that you can do, but this is a key factor. And I have had clients come to me and say that it is one of the things that has made the biggest difference. It also, looking at number 3, breath is presence and control. You cannot be present if you don't breathe properly. And people who don't breathe when they present, and obviously I'm being ridiculous because you have to breathe, but some people are desperate to get it over with. Is that you? I know I've had so many people say that to me. They just want to get it over with. So they speed up and they don't breathe, and there's no gap. And when there are no gaps, you have no presence. Breath is presence. Being present is breathing, because breathing is our anchor to the present moment. And it gives you space and it gives your audience space. So, quick story about the US Navy SEALs and one of the things that they learned to do. They had 4 chances to pass this particular exercise during their entire training. And Navy SEALs have an incredibly challenging training because they're going to be dropped into hostile territory. And the training is incredibly rigorous. And there was one area that, even though they were given 4 chances to pass, the pass rate was really low. I think the pass rate was something like 36 people out of 140 in a class, something like that. And what they did was, for this particular exercise that they struggled with, was they were dropped into the bottom of a swimming pool. And they had an oxygen tank, so no issue. So you think, well, what's the problem? They had to stay in there for 20 minutes. No issue at all. Okay, here's the issue. They had their instructors go down into the pool with them. And for 20 minutes, the instructors harass them. They tie up their air tubes. They poke them. They prod them. They shout at them. I don't know how that works underwater, but anyway, luckily it's not a situation I'm ever going to have to be in. But they basically harass them for 20 minutes. They make their lives unbearable. And their goal is not to panic. Now, most of the trainees panic and surface, and very few of them could pass. But one of the things that they were taught various things. One of them was how to talk to themselves, self-talk. One of them was how to visualize. They also had to set short-term, very short-term goals. And the fourth thing they were taught was what's called arousal control in psychology, which means they were taught how to breathe in the way that I'm teaching you now. And the pass rate went up from, I think, 21%, something like that, to about 40%, 38, 40%. Still not incredibly high, but a big jump from where they had been. So one of the things that you can do is breathe. It really does make a difference. All right, let's go on to the second one. How to take some control back, because often we feel helpless when we present. One thing it's really important to know, we're actually programmed to feel fear when we don't feel in control. As soon as we're in a situation where we feel loss of control, unless it's a situation that we have chosen to be in, we are going to be afraid. Now, if we've chosen to feel loss of control, whether that's roller derby or whether it's jumping out of a plane or bungee jumping, that's a loss of control that we choose, okay? So that's okay, because we've made a decision that that is how we are willing to fear. But when we're put into a situation like public speaking, we will feel fear if we don't feel in control. And I have clients say to me, there is nothing that I can control about my public speaking. It's just a horrendous experience from beginning to end. I promise you, there are always things that you can control. And I've never yet had a client that I have not been able to come up with some tools for them. And I'll go into that in a moment. Second thing to know about is that the control does not have to be total. If you have some degree of control over some elements of your public speaking, you are going to feel better about your presentations. And I'm quoting here Amy Arnsten, who's a Yale neurobiologist. She's done a lot of research into this. And she says, even if we have an illusion of control, our cognitive functions are preserved. And what Amy means by that is we can still think clearly. So if we go, okay, we have a level of control here, and I'm about to show you what we can control, some examples, we will still feel as though we're okay. We will not be suffering from so much fear, and we will still be able to think clearly. Fear comes from, here's a quote from an astronaut who's done, again, a lot of research, this guy. You might want to look him up. Very interesting, does a lot of research into fear and control. And he says fear comes from not feeling that you have any control over what's about to happen. And in order to stay calm in a high stress, high stakes situation, all you really need is knowledge. Now, I've added the words practice in brackets because he talks about practice and he means practice as well. He just didn't add it in this quote. Obviously, you need to practice the things that you learn, but the knowledge is a big one. And he uses the example, he said to an interviewer, you know, if you're put in the space shuttle cockpit, because he went, I think he did the space shuttle, some of those flights. He said, if you're put in that cockpit and you're told that in 15 minutes you're taking off into the stratosphere, and if you push the wrong button, everybody will die. He said, obviously that is total loss of control and you'd be entirely freaked out. But if you're put into the cockpit and you're told, yes, you're going to take off into the stratosphere, but you're going to be highly trained in every area, then you gain control and you can stay calm. So when you actually end up taking off, admittedly, it takes years to get the training, but none of us here are planning to be astronauts, I don't think. So if we put it into perspective, if he can do it, and he's talking about blasting a space shuttle into space, and he's fundamentally the chief astronaut, the head dude. If he can do that, and he says you need knowledge, and then you add practice to it, it puts it in perspective. There are things that you can do. So what can you control? Here are some examples. These are things that actual clients have used that have made a big difference. How you walk on stage. Because a lot of people walk on like they're walking somewhere where they'd rather not go to. And this is really obvious. And if you do that, it's going to make you feel bad. And it's going to make other people feel as though you're not confident. So that's going to be a real challenge for everybody. So the way that you walk on, and then the way that you stand in front of your audience, makes a massive difference. Basically, you want to stand up tall. You want to breathe as well. Remember, we've just talked about the breathing. You want to stand up tall, shoulders back, head up, and not protect yourself. So try not to, if possible, to have a lectern or a table in front of you. You might need that, to help you a bit. But if you can manage to be in that space and actually stand there and be willing to feel a level of the fear, and again, I'm going to come on to this in a moment, how much willingness you have towards that, and you stand tall, you hold your head up, you smile if at all possible. People forget to smile, which is quite understandable. They're so focused on what they're trying to say. But if you can smile, you can stand there, you can breathe, you will actually look really good. And I have videoed clients, and the way that they stand and the way that they open out their body language makes a big difference to how they come across. And they go, wow, I look completely different, because they're holding their head up, their shoulders are down, and they have this open body language. And when you have open body language, not only do you gain trust from your audience because you're saying, I have nothing to hide here, but also it gives the impression that you have control of the room. Because what we're trying to do is actually create an alpha state, like a primal state. It's almost like saying we're the head gorilla in the pack here. And when we have open body language, we look powerful. And closed body language means it just comes across as though we're nervous and as though we haven't got it under control. So you open out, you breathe. That just in itself, that's going to make you look better. You smile, even if it's a fake smile, it still works. Apparently, it still makes you feel better as well. So before you go on, if no one's looking at you, you can go back into the toilet where you did your star jumps or something that I mentioned earlier, or your karate chopping the air, and put a finger between your teeth, horizontally between your teeth in your mouth, and it will force you to do a fake smile. I'm doing it, but you can't see me. And if you do that, you'll probably feel so ridiculous that you will actually laugh, which can help. But it also actually makes you feel better. Again, they've shown in studies that you actually feel better when you do that. Thinking about your self-talk, looking at the slide again, the self-talk is crucial because how we talk to ourselves basically rules our lives. And I often say to my clients, have your assumptions past their use-by date. Do you have assumptions about public speaking? And I would bet that you do, because we all do. I mean, I still have assumptions now about public speaking that I could let go of and move on, to an even higher level. But we all have assumptions about where we're up to. And often the fact of saying to a client, you know what, you can let go of that now. Yes, you need to know how, and I'll teach you that, but you can let go of it. And part of that is how you talk to yourself. And often we talk to ourselves very negatively. We get into a downward spiral. And one thing I would say to you is, if you find yourself thinking negatively or putting yourself in a bad mood, try and work out exactly what it was that you just said to yourself. Now, you might know if you're thinking about your public speaking event and you're just going, well, it's going to be, what could you say to yourself? Someone's written here, I'd love to reframe anxiety and stop catastrophizing it. Yeah, and the catastrophize, that's huge. I mean, we do just go, this is going to be a disaster. And then Phil's written not to be so nervous. So, there are two ways of looking at it. I either don't want to be so nervous, but that might be reframed for another person as that they see it as, this is just an appalling situation to be in. I can't stand this. And as soon as you say that and you talk negatively to yourself, I promise you, you can't consistently go against how you talk to yourself. So if you talk to yourself negatively on a regular basis about your public speaking, you will have negative experiences of public speaking. It is inevitable, because what we say to ourselves embeds in our system and it rules our life. And changing your thinking, it's not always easy, but catching what you say to yourself and starting to embed something more positive is really vital. And it's a vital part, and it's a part that people often miss. So I say to clients, what you need to do is you need to come up with a statement. You can call it whatever you like. You can call it an affirmation. You can call it a mantra. you can just call it a positive statement. And this is what you say to yourself whenever you start to go down that pathway of catastrophizing or being negative about your public speaking. And you make it positive and you make it present tense. And you say something like, I'll give you an example. I am now a confident speaker. Now, if that is a bridge too far for you, way too far, and you go, I couldn't possibly go there, because every time I would say that, the other part of my mind would just go, well, that's absolute rubbish, because you know how bad you are. So there's no way you're a confident speaker. So if you're someone who really struggles with speaking, do not attempt to say that positive statement, because what will happen is it will actually backfire and make you feel worse about yourself. And again, all the recent research is showing this. So what you want to do is actually say something like this instead. I am open to moving towards becoming a confident speaker, or I'm open to being a confident presenter. I am willing to move towards being a confident speaker. And if you can say that, your mind will not resist you. So the willingness will be there. There will be an openness in your mindset that was not there before. So you can actually have that work for you. So what you need to do is actually write down a statement, make it positive, make it present tense, make it short so that you can remember it. If you can't remember it when you're lying in bed at night going to sleep, which is a really good time to say it to yourself. Also in the shower in the morning, or if you're lying in the bath, exercising is a really good time to start saying these things to yourself. You need to start embedding it. And it will start to turn you around. It might take a few weeks. It normally does take a few weeks. Some people feel better immediately, but other people it takes a few weeks to start to embed. But you need to say this and say it to yourself consistently every day. And if you feel yourself going down a negative track, come back to it, say it to yourself again. Okay, we should move on. So another way to control what you do is to control your energy level. And again, you can use music, a music playlist to pump yourself up if you need to be pumped up. Oh, and by the way, the general consensus now in terms of the research is that it is better, if you don't know this, it is actually better to run with nervousness than try and calm yourself down while you're presenting. So this does not negate what I've said about the breathing. The breathing is still really important to tell your system that you're safe. But if you do have adrenaline and it's still there in your system to some extent, you just go with it. And you work with that energy level, and it will actually give you the energy that you need to present well. And that can be really important, especially if you're doing a virtual presentation, because it takes a lot more to actually push through a screen than it does in person as well. So you can get a playlist happening. You can exercise beforehand and get your energy up. You can also control your delivery style and how you deliver, and whether or not you're breathing, whether or not you're pausing, all of these things, how you give your opening statement, how convincing you sound. I was talking to a client yesterday who said, I had feedback in an interview that I was not confident enough. And I said, well, there are two things that are going to have shown them if this is indeed true. One of those things is your body language. And we talked about that earlier tonight on the webinar. So open, strong body language, head up, shoulders open, looking like you're not afraid to be there, body language. And the second thing is your voice, your tonality, how you deliver. And that is something else that will make you sound unconfident if you don't work on it. But again, there are so many things that you can do to make yourself sound convincing. And one of those things is to find something in your message that you believe in. So, okay. And if that's a struggle, then find, instead of something you believe in the message, come up with saying, okay, how I get this across to my audience, or the reason that I'm doing this presentation. You can work with that too. Whether that's I have to speak in order to provide for my family, and that's really important. Whatever it is, you need to find a reason. You need to find, pardon me, you need to find a level of energy in terms of how you actually present, so that comes across when you deliver. So that it's not just all about your fear. You want something else to be there other than your fear. And there is always something else there, the possibility, a willingness to challenge yourself. Let's look at the third thing, the final to take away for tonight, and that is to take action. And that can be one of the hardest things for people, you know, to press the button to say, yes, I'm going to book into a course, or to go along and find out about even researching something, go along to a group or go on the internet and find out some ways to help yourself. And if we avoid, one of the main things that they now believe about fear is that avoidance equals continuance. And we know this, don't we? Because we know that if we avoid something, it's going to continue, and it's probably going to get worse. And they talk about fear extinction. Psychologists talk about fear extinction. And that's how the fact that in order to get rid of your fear, or at least minimize it, massively reduce it, you actually have to take action, put yourself in a situation where you do feel fear, and then also be willing to feel that fear as you're in that situation. So not to shut down when you're in the situation. And that you might say, well, that's crazy, because of course I feel the fear when I'm in it. But a lot of people who do shut down, they actually don't feel it while they're in it. And then they don't learn from it. So it's saying, okay, you know what? Like I mentioned earlier, you breathe. If you're completely stressing out, you just breathe and you stand there and you give it some space. You don't fight how you're feeling, because the fighting splits you into two. You've got the person presenting, and then you've got the person fighting the person presenting. And that is a recipe for incredible stress. I've also written in brackets self-disappointment, because if we don't take action to deal with our fear, I know in my own life, I used to be permanently disappointed with myself when I was not an action taker. I loved my comfort zone, hated moving out of it. And so I just used to sit and watch TV and get annoyed with myself or sad with myself that I didn't do anything differently. I didn't do anything about it. And it took me a long time to learn how to move out of it. But boy, once I started to move out, it really makes you feel so much better about yourself. And you don't suffer from that awful sinking disappointment of, oh no, this thing is still here and I'm not doing anything about it. So moving through fear with knowledge, you know, you need to be doing the right things as you move through the fear. It's the only way out. And all the studies and the research tell us this. So it's time to take action. Whatever that is for you, you know, you might want to go to my website. I have about 60 articles, all free. Go and have a look at the website, and you might find something that triggers you as well. So there are ways of taking action. So to sum up what I've talked about tonight, physical tool to breathe, to control your nerves and to gain presence. Secondly, take some control back. It doesn't have to be total control. You take a level of control and you will still feel as though you are in some control, and you still be able to think clearly. And the third thing is to take action. Okay, and here are just a few comments that clients have made. Again, there are more comments on my website if you're interested to go and have a look about the difference that just taking action and using some of these tools, it can make to your life. It can really help you to present where you were never willing to present before. You know, someone said, work with Sarah if you want to overcome your public speaking demons. And someone else has said, Rhiannon has said, oh, you've changed my life, general increase in confidence. And it's, you know, you can actually look forward to presenting. I know it seems extreme, but you can. I promise you, it can happen. I never thought it would happen for me, and it did. And I watch it happen with my clients, and it's an amazing thing to watch. It really is. Okay, so let me just tell you very quickly what the 3-session course looks like. You get 3 1-hour, 60-minute webinars. They're on Thursdays. They start in 2 weeks. So the 11th, the 18th, and the 25th of June. It's 8 p.m. Australian, Sydney, Melbourne time. And they go for about 60 minutes. You will have the chance to ask questions either in that forum, or you can actually ask me questions privately as well. So the sessions will be recorded. If you can't make them live, you can absolutely watch watch them in your own time frame, whatever suits you. You'll also get some PDF exercises and templates. And as well as the 3 webinars, you'll also even a bonus 20-minute coaching session with me over the phone, on Skype, on Zoom, whatever suits you, whichever medium you like, valid for 6 months. And you'd be amazed what you can learn and work with in 20 minutes or so. I'm really happy to talk to you. So you can talk to me privately in that session. You can also ask questions during the course, and you'll get more in-depth information, the type of thing you learned tonight, but also more in-depth, very specific exercises. I tell you exactly what to do and how to do them, how long to do them for, things like that. And it will make a difference. It really will make a difference to you. I also offer a 100% money back guarantee. I put that guarantee behind all my work. So if you're not happy with what you're offered and you don't think it gave you value, then you're very welcome to have your money back. No questions asked. So 100% money back guarantee for you. So the investment, it's normally $197. Until this Sunday, midnight Sunday in Australian time, it's $148. And as I say, you get the bonus session with me and the 3 webinars. So I am going to email you a link, and there is a link to book if you're interested. And the second part of the booking page, there's a coupon box which says coupon code, and in that box you put free webinar 25, and that should work, and you'll get the money off. You get the 25% off. So you'll get the $148 investment. So I will send you the link to that, and I would love for you to join me on this course. I really can promise you that it will make a difference to your public speaking anxiety, and you will be with other people who will understand what you're going through. These are proven techniques, they do work, and the money back guarantee is also always there for you, so you really have nothing to lose from it. So might be worth giving it a go. All right, so if you have any questions, by all means feel free to either email me privately. I will send you a link to the website and to the booking page if you're interested in signing up, but you can also feel free to ask me a question. I will stay for the next few minutes if anyone would like to ask me a question now. Otherwise, I look forward to hearing from you privately, and get in touch at any point. I'm always happy to hear from you and happy to answer any questions. All right, so I wish you very well with your public speaking experiences, and I hope that tonight has been helpful for you. And, you know, I look forward to maybe working with you or perhaps seeing you on a webinar again very soon. All right, thanks very much, everyone. I'll just stick around for a minute or two in case there are any more questions. Have a good night. Okay, I have a question which has come in, and I can't actually see the name of the person, but the question is, can you please remind us how to use breathing when we're actually giving the presentation, when it's not possible to focus on breathing alone? And that is a really good question. And what I would suggest is that there's actually another technique that you can use, because yes, you are absolutely right. You can't stand during the presentation and breathe in and think about your breathing because you're in it and it's too late. What you can do, however, while I'm talking about the breathing, is you still need to breathe between paragraphs. You might be able to get yourself a drink of water. If you do have slides, if people are reading a slide, you can actually breathe at that point. So it's something to be aware of. But what I normally suggest that people do when you're actually in the presentation and you can't take one of these focused times to breathe, is what I do instead for people is I suggest that you ground yourself. And this is an amazing technique which actually comes from actors, and it's about feeling your feet. Some people like to feel their core and they center themselves and they actually go, because it's, some people say, oh no, it's closer to my brain, and I can actually think better if I imagine feeling my feeling my core. And people who exercise a lot, if you do Pilates or you do some kind of sport where you're very used to feeling your core in the center of your body, that can be really good. It's also in Eastern philosophy, where the Eastern philosophers believe that's where our energy comes from. However, for a lot of people, the thing that they feel the best with is by actually feeling their feet. So this is a way of grounding you, because when we get stressed out, stress levels rise, and the stress level goes up into our head, and we just become, this talking head. And we're hardly aware of our body, because we're trying often as well to shut off from our body because it feels really unpleasant. It's counterintuitive, I know, but you actually want to do the opposite. So what you want to do is feel your feet. I get some people to actually squeeze their toes, because nobody's ever going to see that. But it's a way of getting you back grounded, because where you want your point of power is the lower half of your body. So you want to get settled into the lower half of your body. And if you do that, not only will you feel better, but you're also going to look better as well. So that will make a big difference. You can also add a 1-word or 2-word idea to, as you're feeling your feet, you can actually say, what I would say is, I'd say grounded, because that works for me. But let's say you wanted to be calm, or what would it be? You want to use a positive statement. So you'd never say something like not stressed, because if you say not stressed, our brain actually doesn't hear the not, and it just hears stressed. So always make it a positive statement, but it needs to be super short, because it's something that you're going to be gathering your thoughts with. So I would just go, okay, if something happened and I started to stress out, I would go in my head, I would say grounded, and I would feel my feet. And I can do that in like a second. And it just makes me feel like, okay, I have some control back. I have an internal sense of control back. Then at the end of a paragraph or whatever, I would actively breathe. And if I was pausing to make a point, and we always want to pause, by the way, when we're making a point, then I would breathe during that as well. So if I were to say to you, if there is only one thing you get from this webinar tonight, let it be this: the fact that you can actually take some control over your presentation. Okay, so that is what I would say. If I were in a presentation and you might have thought, oh, that's kind of a bit weird because she waited a long time. But in actual fact, if I were in front of an audience, that works really well. And it just makes me look like I have some presence, I have some control. And in that space, I actually breathed and I got some control back. So it's a way of doing that. Kristen, does that help? I'm hoping that answers the question for you and it gives you an idea. Now, Andy said, is using notes while presenting okay? Oh, yes, totally. Totally. I have seen speakers who earn $25,000 for giving a presentation who use notes. There is nothing wrong with using notes. And you don't want to be out there on a high wire act. You don't want to be on that tightrope strung up between two buildings with no safety net. And I always say to people, if you have no notes, you've got no safety net. You might not use them, but either put them on the lectern or have cue cards in your hand. I use little cue cards. They used to be called 3x5 cards. I don't know what they're called now, but you can buy them in any newsagents. You can get them in different colors. And they work incredibly well. I just hold those in my hand. I number them, by the way. I have seen speakers drop I've never done it, but I've seen speakers drop their cue cards. And in fact, one guy dropped his on the way up onto the stage and they went, woo, all over the stage. And he was grotting around on the floor, which wasn't very dignified, but would have been okay. But of course, when he stood up, they were all out of order and he didn't have a clue. And the rest of the presentation was slightly messy, to put it mildly, because he didn't actually know where he was and he was shuffling cards all the time. But no, using cue cards, really good. They always should be there as a safety net. Never, ever, ever try and memorize your presentation unless you are in Toastmasters and you're doing a competition. In that case, fine, that's how they do it. I used to be in Toastmasters. I memorized. It takes hours, weeks. It takes a really long time. But if you're just giving a normal presentation, never try and memorize it. It's a really bad idea. Using your slides as notes is also fine, but you need to know your slides, and please don't put a lot of text on your slides to use as prompts for yourself. That is a disaster. You will never be with your audience properly. and you will have low energy, and it will be obvious that you are reading the slides. And it's one of the most common mistakes that I see. I work with clients on this all the time. You have to put the work in so that you know what's coming on your slides well enough, and that you have a few words there as cues for you, but you are not speaking entire paragraphs. And pardon me. And I've had clients who use their slides and they put like paragraphs of material on those slides, and A, it looks terrible, B, the audience members are going to read, and they read much faster than we speak as a speaker. So you've got this mismatch and you haven't got attention on you. Now you might be going, oh, thank God the attention's not on me and it's on the slide. Yeah, I get that. However, that's not good. You want the attention to be on you. Now, it's fine to have the attention on the slide, but not in full paragraphs. So that really is vital to know. I hope I've given you enough info on that. If feel free to ask another question, Andy, if that's not enough for you. Now, Phil, how much work would I need to do to improve as a nervous speaker? Ooh, it depends on you. It depends on a few factors, but one of those factors is, as I say, it depends on where you are now. So, and then where you want to get to. So if you're nervous, I could give you probably 4 techniques, and there'd be a couple of physical, there'd be something around your thinking, there'd probably be visualization. It would depend on you, because I always find out, what's important, what matters to you, if I possibly can. But you can make small tweaks that make a really big difference. I mean, I've had clients who've come to me for one private session that goes for, an hour or so, and they've walked away and it's made a massive difference, because they've either had, the old aha moment where they've gone, oh my God, I never realized that. That's the thing that was the issue for me. Let me give you an example of that. I had one client, in fact, I've had a few people who've said this to me. One very recently who was a writer and wrote the presentation, but never practiced speaking it. And then every time he stood up to present it, he would fall over his words and trip over his words. And it was really obvious from the word go that these were words that should not have been spoken. They were to be read on a page. They were not meant to be spoken. But because he was so afraid of speaking, he would never practice. And because he didn't practice out loud, which is a key factor, because he didn't practice out loud, he didn't realize that this was not how you speak. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? But the conversational type of speech that we have is not the same as written speech. But he wasn't willing to go there and do that. And as soon as he started to do that, he realized, as an example, that was his issue. And when he started to speak conversationally, as if he were just talking to one person, which is all, by the way, we're ever doing, we're talking to one person. It's just that there are more people in the room. But fundamentally, that's what we're after. Once he did that, it made a big difference. So there can be quite a huge shift. Again, for some people, it's the breathing, because they go, oh, I was just racing and it's adrenaline. And when I learned how to breathe and I put it into practice, it made a difference really fast. That's one of the things that can really make a difference. Just talking to yourself differently makes a massive difference. So Phil, it really does depend on how nervous you are and where you're coming from. But all I can say to you is that there are shifts that you can make, things that you can learn. I put it this way, I've never had a client that has not walked away with something that they could use that was helpful, that made a difference to them. It's not, I don't know, it's not something that's that mystical. There are things that, yes, you need to learn these things in. A lot of them are common sense and a lot of them are individual to you, but you can always make a shift. So how much work would you need to sum up? I reckon if you spent 5 minutes a day on whatever it was you were working on, and you did that for 3 weeks, something like that. 3 weeks is quite a common length of time to make a real shift. Some people make a shift faster than that. but you would definitely see changes. You would have to be consistent with your practice though, and that is really important. I am not going to pretend to anybody that you can make a difference if you don't practice these things in, because what's that old phrase? If you keep doing what you're doing, you'll get what you've always got. We need to be willing and open to trying something differently. But for people who are willing to do that, it really does make a difference. Phil, I hope that answers your question. It's one of those sort of questions, how long is a piece of string? But I hope I've given you enough on that one. Feel free to come back if you would like any other response about something specific. Very happy to answer. So I'll just wait. Looks like that at this point is the final question. I'll wait another 30 seconds, a minute or so, and then I will sign out of the webinar room, and I'll send you the link if you're interested in the course. So I know I've touched on a few different things tonight, and hopefully you have found them useful. I've given you something that you can take away and work with. And as I say, feel free, if you have any questions, you can always email me. I'm happy to hear from you. Okay, well, we have just gone past the hour, and I think I will sign out. Okay, I think there's another question coming through, and it's just... No, it's not clear to me yet, but I'm going to wait. There's always a delay. There's always a delay in Google Hangouts, which is how this is functioning. It's going through Webinar Jam, but that's done through Google Hangouts. So, okay, I can't see any more coming through. No, nothing more coming through. Okay, well, in that case, I will say goodnight, if it's nighttime where you are, and I hope you have enjoyed. Oh, no, one more has just come through. Anu is saying, how do I answer questions during a Q&A and think critically when nervous during a presentation? Okay. How do you answer questions during a Q&A? Oh, gosh. Yeah, there are a lot of things we could cover here. In terms of how you answer, it depends on what it is you're trying to do. I would always suggest that you prepare questions in your mind beforehand. And if there's one thing that you really hope the audience is not going to ask you, make sure you've answered that in your own mind, because they are very likely to ask that question, and you really don't want that happening and to be caught with that one. So that makes a big difference. You need to know. And there are not that many different types of questions that people are going to ask, probably 5 or 6 different types that they could ask you. And that might be to do with, your credibility, your experience, the particular topic that you're talking about. So try and think it through. If you can, get a friend or someone to maybe ask you some questions around the topic. How do you think critically when you're nervous? Well, you breathe for a start, Anu. That's really important. And you make sure you take time, so that if you're asked a difficult question, don't be afraid to say, okay, just give me a moment, let me think about that. It shows that you have some control. Again, it's coming back to this control concept about what it is that you're talking about, and that will help as well. If you have a difficult audience member, you can make sure that you don't let them hog too much of the time and say, look, you know, I appreciate your point. We might need to come back to this, you know, at the end of the session. Some people, to use the corporate language, you know, let's take this offline. We can talk about it another time. When you are nervous as well, it's really important that you listen carefully to the question, because when we're stressed out and we go into Q&A, we actually sometimes don't hear the question properly. So if you need to take time or to ask the person to, you know, to say the question again, don't be afraid of that. And then don't be afraid of taking some time and just think to yourself, okay, what is this person actually asking me? You know, what is this about? Because sometimes things can be covered. You know, people ask a question, but really it's about their own agenda. And then it's working out, you know, what's important, what is the most important thing to answer. So it's not being afraid to take the time to ask them to repeat the question if you need to make sure you breathe. The breathing will really help, because again, you're very likely to freeze when and not think properly when you're stressed and when you're nervous. So taking that time, and if you're completely stuck, by the way, you can either ask other audience members if that is possible for you, or you can simply say, I don't know, but I will get back to you. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's far better to do that than to faff around and fluff around and obviously not know what you're talking about. So that's also a factor too. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know, and don't be afraid to take time as you answer. So it's about grounding yourself, feeling your feet if you need to, breathing, really listening to the question. So it's about letting go in the moment. So when you're asked a question and you go into Q&A, you just take the time, you open, almost physically in your mind, open your ears and just breathe and listen. Focus in on the question so that you don't get thrown and not hear it properly and then rush to answer. So taking time is important. I know that you probably don't want to appear as though you don't know the answer, or you're slow on the uptake around the answer, but it's far better to take some time and get an answer out than it is to rush something or mishear what they're saying or misunderstand. And if someone asks you a question that you don't understand, then you can either say you'll get back to them, or you can again, I'll ask another audience member, or you can summarize what you thought they said, and then is that what you meant? You can actually do that as well. So there are all sorts of techniques that you can learn around Q&A, and those are just a few of them. So I hope that that's helped you. Anu, okay. All right, well, I can't see any more questions, so I am now going to sign off and say thank you very much for joining me on this webinar. I've had a lot of fun, and I hope that you've had fun and learned something. Maybe you don't associate public speaking with fun, but believe me, it is possible. So I say goodnight to you, and I will send you a link if you're interested in signing up for the 3 webinars. And I hope to hear from you or to work with you at some point. And Kristen's saying, great webinar, thanks. Good, thanks, Kristen. I'm really glad you enjoyed it. Fantastic. All right. Bye for now, everyone.